Donald Trump, the President of the United States, spurred a mob of domestic enemies of the Constitution to march down the Capitol and subvert American democracy. January 6th was the culmination of an attempted coup, a brazen attempt, as one rioter put it shortly after January 6th, to overthrow the government. The violence was no accident. It represented Trump's last stand, most desperate chance to halt the transfer of power.
Sobering words from a member of our Congress. Welcome to Legally Speaking. I'm Stephanie Haney, legal analyst and attorney licensed in California and Ohio. Today, we're looking at the January 6th hearings. January 6, 2021, the day supporters of former President Donald Trump stormed the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C., carrying out an insurrection. Many say basically at the direction of the former president. Throughout 8 hearings over 6 weeks this summer, the House Select Committee, a bipartisan committee from the U.S. House of Representatives, presented the findings of their investigation into that day. What you heard at the beginning of this show was Chairman and Representative Benny Thomas summarizing the basic findings on day 1. Here we'll look at more key moments from those hearings. Knowing more are expected in the fall, and in the end we'll talk about the goal of all of this and whether it has been achieved. First, let's hear from Capitol Police Officer Caroline Edwards from day 1 of the hearings, describing what she saw that day and how she was treated.
I can just remember my breath catching in my throat because what I saw was just a war scene. It was something like I had seen out of the movies. I couldn't believe my eyes. There were officers on the ground, they were bleeding, they were throwing up, they had, I saw friends with blood all over their faces. I was slipping in people's blood. I was catching people as they fell. It was carnage. It was chaos. I was called a lot of things on January 6, 2021 and the days thereafter. I was called Nancy Pelosi's dog, called incompetent, called a hero, and a villain. I was called a traitor to my country, my oath, and my Constitution.
That was the focus of day 1, hearing from the people on the ground what it was like to be in that, not knowing if they would make it home. The video showed by the committee, much of it taken and posted online by the insurrectionists themselves, is hard to watch. The committee holds the former president responsible for what happened that day, connected to his refusal to accept the 2020 election results and current President Joe Biden's win. This is despite evidence that Trump was told by people in his inner circle that it was over. On day 2, we heard from William Barr, who served as Attorney General during the last half of Trump's presidency. Barr was one of the people who testified that he told the former president that his repeated election fraud claims were not based in reality.
My opinion then and my opinion now is that the election was not stolen by fraud. I thought, boy, if he really believes this stuff, he has, lost contact with he's become detached from reality if he really believes this stuff.
Barr resigned as Attorney General in mid-December of 2020, cutting ties with the administration several weeks before Trump supporters would storm the Capitol. Former Vice President Mike Pence did not, and he became the subject of the former president's anger leading up to and on January 6th, when Pence refused to overturn the 2020 election by refusing to throw out electoral college votes that didn't belong to Trump. Before the former president was banned by Twitter, he posted that Pence could reject what he called fraudulently chosen electors, none of which is true. Greg Jacobs, counsel to the former vice president, testified to that fact on day 3 of the hearings.
We examined practice under the Electoral Count Act, and critically, no vice president in 230 years of history had ever claimed to have that kind of authority, hadn't claimed authority to reject electoral votes, had not claimed authority to return electoral votes back to the states.
Because Pence took that stand, he became a target for the mob, with people chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," and some of them coming very close to him. Despite the circumstances, the committee showed that Pence was committed to preserving the electoral process, with Jacobs explaining Pence's thought process that day.
The vice president did not want to take any chance that the world would see the vice president of the United States fleeing the United States Capitol. He was determined that we would complete the work that we had set out to do that day, that it was his constitutional duty to see through.
While Pence got the brunt of the pressure on January 6th, on day 4 of the hearings, the committee showed that leading up to Electoral College certification, it was state election officials that Trump targeted, and that it's had lasting consequences on their lives, particularly in Georgia, despite no evidence of the kind of election fraud that the former president kept claiming happened, the kind that would have changed the results in Trump's favor.
We counted the ballots where the first tabulation would be scanned. Then when we did our 100% hand audit of the all 5 million ballots in the state of Georgia, all cast in place, all absentee ballots, they were all hand recounted, and they came remarkably close to the first count. And then upon the election being certified, President Trump, because he was within 0.5%, could ask for a recount. And then we recounted them again through the scanners, and we got remarkably the same count. 3 counts, all remarkably close, which showed that President Trump did come up short.
There is nowhere I feel safe. Nowhere. Do you know how it feels to have the President of the United States to target you? The President of the United States is supposed to represent every American, not to target one. But he targeted me.
I haven't been anywhere at all. I've gained about 60 pounds. I just don't do nothing anymore. I don't want to go anywhere. I second guess everything that I do. It's affecting my life in a major way, in every way. All because of lies. For me doing my job, same thing I've been doing forever.
After his efforts to stop legitimate vote counts at the state level were unsuccessful, and as January 6th, election certification day, got closer, the committee showed how the former president wanted the Department of Justice to intervene by seizing voting machines, with testimony from former acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue on day 5 of the hearings.
The president was a little more agitated than he had been in the meeting on the 15th. There was a point at which the president said something about, why don't you guys seize machines?
And for the department to insert itself into the political process this way, I think would have had grave consequences for the country. It may very well have spiraled us into a constitutional crisis.
As we now know, the DOJ didn't do as Trump asked, and he encouraged his supporters to come to Washington, D.C. on January 6th. On day 6 of the hearings, shocking testimony from Cassidy Hutchinson, an aide to Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, showed more about what Trump knew about those supporters being armed in the Capitol and how he was concerned about how full the area looked with people, much more so than any possible violence.
And why was he furious, Ms. Hutchinson?
He was furious because he wanted the arena that we had on the Ellipse to be maxed out at capacity for all attendees. The advance team had relayed to him that the mags were free-flowing. Everybody who wanted to come in had already come in, but he still was angry about the extra space and wanted more people to come in.
And did you go to the rally in the presidential motorcade?
I was there, yes, in the motorcade.
And were you backstage with the president and other members of his staff and family?
I was.
And you told us, Ms. Hutchinson, about particular comments that you heard while you were in the tent area.
When we were in the offstage announce area tent behind the stage, he was very concerned about the shot, meaning the photograph that we would get, because the rally space wasn't full. One of the reasons, which I've previously stated, was because he wanted it to be full and for people to not feel excluded because they'd come far to watch him at the rally. And he felt the mags were at fault for not letting everybody in. But another leading reason, and likely the primary reason, is because he wanted it full and he was angry that we weren't letting people through the mags with weapons, what the Secret Service deems as weapons and our weapons. But when we were in the offstage announce tent, I was part of a conversation. I was in the vicinity of a conversation where I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away.
They're not here to hurt me. Let my people in. Those were the sitting president's words as described by Hutchinson. Hutchinson also described the infamous incident where Trump lunged at a Secret Service officer who was taking him away from the Capitol and back to the White House as things began escalating following the former president's speech to the insurrectionists on January 6th.
The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Renato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
The former president was trying to get back to his supporters who were on their way to storm the halls of Congress following his repeated claims that the election had been stolen from him and them. Among those people were members and leaders of multiple extremist groups who we heard from on day 7 of the January 6th hearings. Here's Representative Liz Cheney, the committee vice chair, questioning one of them.
Mr. Ayers, when you entered the Capitol last year, did you believe that the election had been stolen?
At that time, yeah. Everything that I was seeing online, I definitely believed that that's exactly what that was the case.
And when you heard from President Trump that the election was stolen, how did that make you feel?
Oh, I was very upset, as were most of his supporters. That's basically what got me to come down here.
And do you still believe the election was stolen?
Not so much now. I got away from all the social media when January 6th happened. Basically deleted it all. I started doing my own research and everything. And for me, for something like that to actually take place, it's too big. There's no way you can keep something like that quiet, as big as something like that.
Would it have made a difference to you to know that President Trump himself had no evidence of widespread fraud?
Oh, definitely. Who knows? I may not have come down here then.
That particular rioter had to delete his social media before he could accept that President Joe Biden had actually won the 2020 election. On January 6th, former President Trump was first suspended from Twitter for 12 hours after calling the rioters patriots, and then permanently suspended due to the risk of further incitement of violence. That's according to Twitter's blog. But before that, one Twitter employee testified to what they saw happening on the platform in response to the former president's unfounded tweets about what he continued to call a stolen election.
What was your gut feeling on the night of January 5th?
I believe I sent a Slack message to someone that said something along the lines of, when people are shooting each other tomorrow, I will try and rest in the knowledge that we tried. And so I went to, I don't know that I slept that night, to be honest with you. I was on pins and needles because, again, for months I had been begging and anticipating and attempting to raise the reality that if we made no intervention into what I saw occurring, people were going to die. And on January 5th, I realized no intervention was coming. And even as hard as I had tried to create one or implement one, there was nothing, and we were at the whims and the mercy of a violent crowd that was locked and loaded.
Unfortunately, what that Twitter employee saw and feared coming proved to be reality, and a deadly insurrection did happen on January 6th. In the final hearing of the summer, Day 8, the committee focused on showing what the sitting president did and didn't do during the hours that the Capitol was under attack. One thing he didn't do was unequivocally denounce the violence while it was happening, going uncharacteristically quiet on Twitter despite calls within his administration to say something to get his supporters to just go home. Then U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor Matt Pottinger and then Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Matthews testified about what they saw inside the White House that day.
Mr. Pottinger, you told us that you consider the tweets sent to this point to be, quote, wholly inadequate given the urgency of the crisis. What, in your view, would have been needed?
Yeah, it was insufficient. I think what you could count me among those who was hoping to see an unequivocal, strong statement clearing out the Capitol, telling people to stand down, leave, go home. I think that's what we were hoping for.
So a conversation started in the press office after the president sent out those 2 tweets that I deemed were insufficient. And a colleague suggested that the president shouldn't condemn the violence because they thought it would be, quote, handing a win to the media if he were to condemn his supporters. And I disagreed. I thought that we should condemn the violence and condemn it unequivocally. And I thought that he needed to include a call to action and to tell these people to go home. And a debate ensued over it. And I became visibly frustrated, and my colleagues were well aware of that. And I couldn't believe that we were arguing over this in the middle of the West Wing, talking about the politics of a tweet, being concerned with handing the media a win when we had just watched all of that violence unfold at the Capitol. And so I motioned up at the TV and I said, do you think it looks like we're effing winning? Because I don't think it does. And I again reiterated that I thought that the president needed to condemn the violence because it didn't matter if it was coming from the left or the right, that you should condemn violence 100% of the time.
Following these exchanges, both Pottinger and Matthews resigned from their positions within the next 24 hours. The following day, the sitting president did record a statement to post publicly while being careful to choose language that did not include "the election is now over." Here are outtakes that the committee showed from what would eventually be posted on the former president's behalf.
I would like to begin by addressing the heinous attack yesterday, and to those who broke the law, you will pay. You do not represent our movement, you do not represent our country, and if you broke the law, you can't say that. I already said you will pay. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defied the seat of justice. It's defiled, right? See, I can't see it very well. Okay, I'll do this. I'm going to do this. Let's go. But this election is now over. Congress has certified the results. I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
Congress did certify the 2020 election results, and President Joe Biden took office on January 20th, 2021. Now, more than a year and a half later, our nation is still contending with what happened, leading up to the point of, thankfully, a peaceful transfer of power. Throughout these 8 hearings, the committee showed all of us shocking evidence of what the former president did and didn't do, contributing to the deadly violence before Inauguration Day. 5 people died either during or after the attack, including 4 protesters and 1 police officer. About 140 officers were injured that day. What was the goal of these hearings? Definitely to raise awareness about what actually happened in our country on January 6th and in the weeks leading up to that terrible day. Possibly to drain support for a future run for office by Donald Trump. Possibly to try to take away support from the people in his closest circle who were also closely involved with what happened. Also, maybe to gain support for a criminal conviction of the former president. The committee presented evidence that could make a strong case for several charges, including trying to stop an official proceeding of Congress, seditious conspiracy, the charge many of the rioters themselves face, witness tampering, and wire fraud related to raising millions of dollars for a so-called election defense fund that his aides said didn't actually exist. Now it will be up to the Department of Justice, led by Attorney General Merrick Garland, to decide whether to pursue charges against him or his aides. According to reporters from Rolling Stone magazine, Trump's legal team has become increasingly anxious that he will be indicted on charges related to the insurrection and are preemptively preparing a legal defense against criminal charges. If that proves to be the case, you know we'll be here with you, breaking it all down, legally speaking.